Hey everyone, I'm Crystal Preston-Watson, Accessibility and Quality Engineer, also host of Accessibility Savvy when I have the time. Today I wanted to discuss semantic HTML and its importance to accessibility. In this video, I'm going to demo two versions of a basic website I made, one built with divs and the other using semantic HTML elements. Before I begin, I want to give a quick definition of semantic HTML. Basically, semantic elements convey meaning and context to the browser. Examples are the UL element, which represents an unordered list, and the button element that represents a clickable button. Semantic elements like the two I just mentioned have been around since the earliest versions of HTML. But in HTML5, several new elements were introduced, including many that help enhance content and page structure. One of the benefits of semantic HTML is cleaner and understandable code, a good thing when it comes to building websites and web applications. Another is, and the reason for this video, improved accessibility. Semantic elements help keyboard-only navigation, and assistive technologies like screen readers and switches are also able to make use of them via a browser's accessibility API. Since you're watching this, I'm going to assume that you're familiar with div and span elements. These are HTML elements, but they're semantically empty. As I go through the demo, it'll become clear why this can cause issues, especially with accessibility. I realized after recording the majority of this video that I referred to ARIA without explaining what it is. ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. It's a set of attributes that help provide accessibility to web pages and applications that isn't possible with native HTML. There's a popular saying in the accessibility tech community that no ARIA is better than bad ARIA, and that's because it's more often than not used incorrectly and can create far more problems than it fixes. Whenever possible, you should use semantic code over ARIA. Okay, so here I have a basic site that I created. Other than the text of the first navigation link right here that says HTML5 version and div version, the two versions are identical. So I have a header, and then that header I have a site title, which says right here, basic site. And then I have some navigation. So the HTML5 version is the first link, link 2, link 3, and then I have an article, 13 best practices for remote workers in the Jeff Goldblum industry. Oh, very exciting. This article has an image of a very comely Jeff Goldblum. And then below the article, I have a form, and that form has 3 fields, a first name field, a last name field, enter your email field, and a submit button. And then next to the article is a sidebar, nothing special, just says sidebar, and then has some filler text. And finally, we have a footer, and that footer has 3 links, link 4, link 5, link 6. I know these links are very interesting. I know you want to read where they take you to, and a copyright notice. So I am going to demo the div version first. I'm going to show you the code, and then I'm going to go through the site using keyboard-only navigation. And after the keyboard navigation, I'm going to take you through it again with a screen reader. I'm on a Mac right now, so I'll be doing that via VoiceOver. So let's go to the code. So this site, the div version of the site is built with pretty much all divs. For all the containers, you see here, this is a just a container because I'm using CSS grid. So this is my container, and you can see my template areas. I'm kind of brushing up on CSS because I heavily relied on Bootstrap for quite a few years. So I'm trying to get more back in touch with kind of that vanilla CSS. And you can see a lot of my divs have classes to give it, styling and, other stuff to do with layout. But I have some things like another list for my navigation, H1, H1 elements from the site title, and H2s for my article headline and paragraph tags. Here's my image using an image element, and it does have alt text on it. And my form, all my form labels are in divs, but the inputs are here. So first name input, last name input, and input for email. And my button is a div. It has some functionality via JavaScript, but that's it. So this is to have a site that's primarily made up of divs isn't really that unusual. And I'll keep scrolling down. There's my copyright notice. And here's the JavaScript. Again, nothing special. Very, very quick and dirty to give that button some functionality. So let's go back to the browser and do some keyboard navigation. So if you're unfamiliar with how to navigate using a keyboard, the basic key commands you need to know are Tab to navigate forward, Shift Tab to navigate backwards, Enter to activate a link, Enter or Spacebar to activate buttons. There are a few others, but for this video, those are all I really, really need. So let's get started. Let me hit Tab. I'm actually at the bottom of the site, so I'm going to Shift Tab up really quickly, back up to the top. So I'm at the top, very top of the site. If I would actually Shift Tab back, it would actually take me to the address bar. So with this, I'm at the very top of the site. I'm on the very first link in the navigation, and let me hit Tab again. I am on the second link and the third link right there. And let me hit Tab one more time. And I'm at the first form input. I should note that keyboard navigation only focuses on interactive elements on the page. That's why Focus skipped the article, image, and sidebar. Focus is now on the second input. And now it's on the third. Pretty much everything is going as expected. So let me hit Tab again. So Focus went from the enter your email input straight to the first link in the footer navigation. And it's completely skipped over the submit button. The reason for this is that the browser doesn't know that the button is a button and should get focus. The only way I can interact with it is using a mouse. And it's pretty common to see buttons built this way. So let me actually take my mouse, hovering over the button. You can see now it does, and then you go, it does button stuff. So actually, let's go back to and look at the code. Go to our button. When you build a button with a div and give it functionality using JavaScript, that isn't enough for the browser to know that it should have keyboard focus, which means if I wanted to give this, div, if I wanted the browser to know this div was a button, I would have to do something extra to it. And that might mean using ARIA, giving a row a button, and also putting a tab index to put it in the in the tab order for the site. This that wouldn't completely um, make the button work because of the the quick and dirty um, uh, JavaScript I have on it. Because this, as you can see right here, this function, if I go down, it has an event listener like of click. And so even if I put it in the tab order and I tried to interact with it, though the keyboard would focus on the button, I couldn't do anything with the button. I wouldn't be able to hit return or the space bar. I would only be able to click it because of the way this is built. And that's one of the issues with how, if you're not using semantic code and you're trying to, fix things. Now, this is something, and if you're dealing with legacy code or some other unavoidable situations, that's going to happen. You're going to have to find a way to deal with it. You may not be able to use a semantic button, and I definitely understand that. But if you can use a semantic button, we'll see why when I go over the semantic version, why it's just so much, you don't have to do all that kind of that heavy lifting to get that um, accessible like interaction, accessible kind of flair, for a lack of a better word to say for it. So let's jump back to the site, and now I'm going to navigate it using VoiceOver.
EML demo web content.
I'm not going to go over the commands to navigate VoiceOver. I will, however, link to some resources to learn more about it in the video description. You might also notice that announcements get cut off. I'm doing that because some of these descriptions can be wordy, and for this demo, you don't need to hear the full descriptions announced. So let's get started. And but I will say I'm not going to go over. I did say I'm not going to go over the commands, but for the basic navigation, I am still using Tab and Shift Tab so Tab to go forward and Shift Tab to navigate backwards.
Visited link HTML5 version. You are link 2. You are currently on a link inside of web. Link 3. You are currently on a link inside of web content. To edit text with autofill menu, blank. To open edit text with autofill menu, blank. To open the auto.
You might have noticed that VoiceOver only announces edit text and does not announce the input label. This is because the label is only visual and not programmatically associated with the form control. So let me cut off VoiceOver and we'll go back over to the code.
VoiceOver off.
A not uncommon occurrence with form labels is to have them nestled in divs or paragraph elements, making the label only accessible visually. This means a screen reader will only announce the input type. To make the label accessible to a screen reader, in most cases, you want to use the label element, or you can use ARIA. We'll see the label element in action when we demo the semantic version. So let's go back to the browser.
Text with autofill menu, blank, has keyboard focus. To open the autofill menu, press the up or down arrow key, then press the return key to enter it into the form. You are currently on a text field. Edit text, blank. You are currently on a text visited link, link 4. You are currently on a link inside of web.
Just like I explained during the keyboard navigation, the browser doesn't know that the button here is a button and that it should get focus. And this is because VoiceOver uses the browser's accessibility API. So VoiceOver also skips over it. Before we switch to the semantic site, let's take time to explore this version using VoiceOver's rotor. Let me
Windows spots menu.
Move this
link 4
out of the way really quickly.
Inside of web content Windows spots menu.
This is how I normally use VoiceOver when I when I do need a screen reader, I do have visual impairments. As you can see, I am not using VoiceOver the entire time because my visual impairments I have, um, I can sometimes I can see well enough to not use a screen reader. Sometimes I not. This is one of the times I have a hard contact. Not going to get too much into that. So, but when I do need to rely on a screen reader and I'm using VoiceOver, I use the rotor versus just using tab and things like that. And so this, let me just kind of go through it. You have here just window spots, links, and that shows you all the links on the page.
Headings menu.
Headings, again, if you're using your H1, H2s, this is why it's also when you're using headings, being mindful of like kind of the hierarchy and like in structure and hierarchy order and structure is important.
Form controls menu.
Form controls. This is something that happens a lot when you now you can see if I'm someone who's going to a site, I'm on VoiceOver, I'm using, we already saw it when I was just kind of navigating just in using tab, but if I'm using the rotor, again, if I'm coming to see all these form controls, it's just telling me edit text. I have no clue to what to do with this.
Images menu.
You have images. Again, this is one of the things of why it's important to have alt text. If the alt text is the images are, that do convey meaning and context, it's really important to have that because, again, I'm someone that can, as a screen reader user, I can access that information.
Window spots menu, links menu.
And there's actually a couple menus missing from this, and you'll see what those menus are because they do show up when we're on the semantic version of the site. And so this is it for the demo, the Div Site demo, and now we're going to go ahead and explore the semantic version. Here's the code for the semantic version. One of the first things after the opening body tag is a div. And that's because divs aren't a bad thing. They're only bad when they're used badly. Divs are generic containers that should be used for styling and layout. This div is being used for the layout because, as I showed, I created both versions of the site using CSS Grid. All the divs on this page are for layouts. Many, I don't know how they help the layout, but I know if I were to delete one of them, the layout gets all wonky. So here's the header. And the header element is for introductory content and components like search or this navigation here. And in this header, we see that we have a site title and the navigation, which is wrapped in a nav element. And we have links that are being used to provide navigation. And so they should be in the nav. The nav doesn't need to be exclusively used in headers. You can use it elsewhere. It's pretty much if you have some type of navigation, you links that are used for navigation, you want to wrap them in a nav a nav element. I also have a nav element in the footer below. So after our header, we have the main element here. And this consists of content or functionality that's central to a page. And in this main, we have an article right here. And an article should be content that's, that would be shared on its own, like a blog post or some kind of like, or an article as where it gets its name. And, if I had a group of articles that dealt with a particular topic, I would have a section element to group them in. I don't here, but a section is a generic standalone section element. Like it's a, element that you use for kind of like standalone content. A section is different from a div in that it does have semantic meaning, and that is that, the content within it has related grouping. A lot of stuff is still the same as from the div, and of my article. And now I'm at the form. And first, I use the form element to note that everything within is going to do some data collection. Next, I have my label and my labels and input elements. Unlike the div version, the labels are both for this in this form are both visually and programmatically associated with the inputs. That means the screen reader will announce the label with the input, and you'll be able to see that with when I fire up VoiceOver. So here, like the label for first name, you have first name and you input name, and as you can see, because it's like label for first name, this input here, and the name is first name. And so not only do visually this can be seen, but then it is programmatically connected as well. And that is the same for all of these inputs. And now the button. I went into why a semantic button is preferred earlier on the other version of the site. When I demoed using both the keyboard and VoiceOver, you'll notice you'll notice that it has keyboard focus. So we're leaving the main area, and there is the aside. And the asides are for content like indirectly related to page's main content. You'll commonly see them used for sidebars as I have here. And lastly, we are at the footer. Footer elements are usually where you find content like the copyright, and we have copyright stuff here, terms and conditions, secondary navigation. See, there's the secondary nav, and like legal notices and stuff like that. So this scan of the code was a little bit longer than the previous one, and this is why semantic code is just so great. Just going through the code tells us so much. You notice that I have comments throughout the code, and on this version and the other version. I try to do this as much as possible, especially for easy projects, as I have come back months and, let's be honest, years later to have no clue what the hell is going on. But even if I didn't have these comments, I probably would have an easier time figuring out the layout and the purpose of the site with the semantic code here versus the other version, which is just divs. So I'm going to jump over and we're going to get into some keyboard navigation. Okay, so we're at the HTML5 semantic, I keep calling it HTML5, but semantic HTML version site. I'm gonna navigate using the keyboard. I'm not gonna spend as long as I did last time because there's only going to be one area where you'll notice a dramatic difference in keyboard navigation. Faces that look great. And there we are. So, so here, the keyboard navigates to the keyboard navigates to the button, and then if I hit it with the return key, an action took place. That action was just to go to the top of the page because this form doesn't do anything, but let's all pretend that it did. So let's finish our navigation. I think I'm back at the top. So let's go really quickly. There, like 6. Okay, we are back up to the top. So now I'm going to switch over to VoiceOver. And this is where you'll experience a lot of the benefits of semantic HTML has to offer. Okay, I'm just going to jump right into it.
Visited link. List 3 items. You are visited link. Link 2. You are currently on a link. Visited link. Link 3. You are currently on a link. To click this link, press caps lock. First name, contact info autofill. Edit text with autofill menu. Main. To open the autofill menu, press the
a
up or
few
down
things
button, then press the
here.
return key to enter it into the form.
One,
You are
unlike
currently on a
with
text
the
field. To
Div
enter text
version
in
of the
this field,
site,
type. To open the
VoiceOver
autofill menu,
announced
press
the
the up or
form
down key,
label,
then press the
and it
return key to
also
enter it into the form.
announced the main content area. And this is all due to the semantic elements. The elements, through the accessibility API that, give VoiceOver detailed information that it can then announce to the user. And let's go through the other form fields.
Last name, contact info autofill. Edit text with autofill menu. Enter your email. Edit text. You are currently on a text field. To enter text and hit submit.
And there's
You are
submit
currently on a button. To
button.
click this button, press caps lock with space.
Yeah, so the button has focus, and VoiceOver knows that it has it, and it's a button, which is perfect. Actually, I'm going to stop here. I know there's a couple other links, but I want to open the rotor and point out some things that were missing from the rotor menus last time.
Headings menu. Form controls menu.
So first we have form controls, which now includes the labels for the inputs and
First name,
also
last name,
includes
enter your email, submit. Button.
our button.
Enter your email, edit text, last name, edit text, first name, landmarks menu.
And actually coming
Articles
back to the
menu.
landmarks, we have article. And the article just says article. There's some things with that to get, you would actually need to do ARIA label to make sure that each article would have a unique name. I'm not going to go into that, but it does see that as an article. You need to do a little bit, and that's where, the good use of ARIA comes in at right here. So you do have this, you have semantic HTML. It's, it does give access, but there needs to be a little bit something to make it truly accessible. So that's what you're seeing here. So with just, right now it just says article. It's not pulling in the H1 heading for this particular menu. You do see the heading in the headings menu. But that's how you would get a unique heading for this particular menu.
Buttons menu. Submit.
Buttons, and that menu was missing before because now there is a button that can be listed, and that's because we use the semantic button element.
Images menu.
Images
Windows
there.
Links menu. Headings menu.
And I want to go back
Controls menu. Landmarks menu.
to landmarks. So using semantic elements means that VoiceOver can communicate the section layout to the user. And you probably noticed that some of these have different names than the HTML elements. And let me just kind of go. So the banner is actually the header. Let's go back.
Landmarks menu. Banner.
You have navigation. Again, I was talking about the article. You would want to do that to make sure you have unique names for like your primary so I would like using like ARIA like label or label by, depending on how I do it, to give this say like primary navigation, and then maybe the footer down here to say secondary secondary navigation. We do have our main, that's right here. Complementary is the aside, and then content information is the footer. I'm not entirely sure why they use different names in the semantic HTML. I think maybe because it hasn't changed. These are like it's probably been like that before HTML5 was um, like the standard. So you know what? I know, though I don't know this. I know someone will either comment on this video or tweet at me on Twitter the reason why, and if I find a good article on it, I will link to it in the video description. And with that, I'm going to bring this to a close. I didn't go over every semantic element today. I will, however, link to some videos and articles that explore semantic HTML on a deeper level in the video description. I was motivated to make this video in response to an interactive poll I created on Twitter to test people's knowledge on alternative HTML elements for divs. You can find a link to that poll in the video description as well. Twitter is also where you can find me if you have any questions about anything I covered today, or if you just love memes about accessibility. You can find me at Scopic Engineer. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.